you could have voted twice, right?
Yes, that was my initial thought when I, looked at the two ballots side by side and thinking, gee, what are the implications? Once I realized it wasn't my neighbor's ballot that I had accidentally gotten in the mail.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well. People know what's happening and they see what's happening and it's before their eyes. And there are many instances which will be reported very shortly. There's tremendous litigation going on. And this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election. And we can't let that happen whatsoever.
Well, we're interrupting this because what the President of the United States is saying, in large part, is absolutely untrue. He began, and we're not going to allow it to keep going because it's not true. He began with there were legal votes, and if they only count the legal votes, I easily win. If they count the illegal votes, they're trying to steal the election. There is not a scintilla of evidence that this is true. None. There's only words here. No truth.
New tonight, an investigation revealed someone from Colombia tried to register more than a dozen dead people as Democratic voters in Florida. That's according to the Associated Press.
Federal prosecutors say a West Seneca postal worker could have interfered with the election by stealing absentee ballots and other mail. He's now charged with delay or destruction of mail.
With Election Day next week, a new investigation has found hundreds of thousands of questionable ballots sent to LA County voters. Investigative reporter David Goldstein has this story.
We found thousands of people in LA County received not one, but two ballots in the mail. Thousands more were sent to people who moved or even died.
Well, there's some new complaints tonight of another Texas elections office blocking poll watchers from seeing ballots counted. Earlier this week, we told you about the state asking the Attorney General to open a criminal investigation into the Travis County Clerk's office. The clerk is accused of sequestering poll watchers in this room where they say they could not see or hear the counting of ballots. And now KXAN investigator Jody Barr has uncovered similar allegations coming up out of Gillespie County.
Over the last couple of days, we've seen lawsuits filed in a number of the battlegrounds that are going to decide the outcome of this election. Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona. Trump and his campaign and legal team and supporters are working really hard in all four of those states to suggest that there is fraud and that the only reason that the votes are close in those four states is because election officials and Democrats are putting in ballots that are illegal into the hopper. And it's really important to say there is absolutely no evidence that this is the case.
Let me be perfectly clear on another point. We are going to find that people did illegally vote. That's going to happen. There are going to be double voters. There are going to be people who did not have the qualifications of a registered voter to vote in this state. That will be found. Is it 10,353? Unlikely. But every election, as I've said, I think every day at this podium, is imperfect.
We are going to find that people did illegally vote. That's going to happen. That is the official account before even counting the votes from a key swing state in the middle of a contested election. And of course, you can believe it because we've already found illegal voting. So much for those claims that voter fraud never happens. Of course it happens. They knew it happened when they told us it would never happen because they're liars. So we know that for sure.
suck it up. Suck it up like we sucked it up, because this is ridiculous. You're not sure that he won. You bringing into question all these Americans who voted legally, came out and stood and voted. How dare you question it?
We need to find out exactly what happened in this election. And there are questions, and that means we have to answer them. For example, in Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Michigan, the Trump campaign has now collected signed affidavits that attest to criminal activity during the voting process. In the city of Detroit, witnesses have alleged under oath that ballots were improperly backdated and counted without matching signatures. One poll watcher alleges that 40,000 late unsealed absentee ballots were counted orally, and all of them went for Democrats. In the state of Nevada, 8 whistleblowers from within the Nevada Election Department say they witnessed voter fraud abetted by other election officials and by their supervisors. According to one affidavit, a poll worker saw people bringing handfuls of ballots to a Biden-Harris campaign van. Those ballots were then filled out at the van, placed in return envelopes. Eventually, Biden supporters formed a wall to block outsiders from seeing what they were doing. Meanwhile, according to voting records, people who were not even alive still somehow managed to vote on Tuesday. In New York, deceased voters cast absentee ballots. On October 9th in Nevada, a man called Fred Stokes Jr. mailed in his vote. The only problem was Fred Stokes Jr. died 3 years ago at the age of 92. The Republican Party of Nevada says it is aware of hundreds of other potential cases of dead people casting ballots. In Pennsylvania, records show turnout from several people who were born in the 19th century. They apparently rose from their graves to vote. Now, all of that is real. We spent all weekend checking it.
They've got nothing. There are 2 recurrent faults in these complaints. One, the numbers of ballots that they're talking about, if they're even talking about specific ballots at all, are minuscule. 53 votes here, a couple hundred votes there. Number 2, they just don't have the proof.
Here's Michigan on the left. It got an update. They updated, meaning a big bunch of votes came in, and so they updated. Every single one of those votes updated, 138,339. Every single one went to Joe Biden after this update of the votes. That seems strange. We don't know the answer. It seems very strange. President Trump has retweeted this map himself with the question mark about how is this possible. Let's look at the next one, because this happened elsewhere. This is that jump in Michigan when all of a sudden 130,000 votes, all of them went to Biden. Let's look at the next one. And here's next door in Wisconsin. You see that same jump. Here is Trump in the lead by a comfortable margin. You can see that red line, comfortable margin, and all of a sudden over 100,000 votes are dropped, all for Biden. It definitely raises questions. Let's look at the next one really quickly. I think we have one more. The same thing happened in Georgia. All of a sudden, a huge bump. Now, President Trump right now is maintaining a slight lead there. But the question is, where's the next big box of votes going to come from? Suspicious. We don't know.
In a front-page investigation today, the New York Times went to every state looking for evidence of fraud and found none.
You have Democrats in this article, Republicans in this article, election officials all across America saying no widespread fraud.
In Antrim County, ballots were counted for Democrats that were meant for Republicans, causing a 6,000 vote swing against our candidates. The county clerk came forward and said tabulating software glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes. Since then, we have now discovered that 47 counties use this same software in the same capacity.
Sydney, we talked about the Dominion software. I know that there were voting irregularities. Tell me about that.
That's to put it mildly. The computer glitches could not and should not have happened at all. That is where the fraud took place, where they were flipping votes in the computer system or adding votes that did not exist. We need an audit of all of the computer systems that played any role in this fraud whatsoever.
So while some, including the president, continue to spew baseless claims of fraud, claims for which his team has not produced one iota of evidence, what we have seen here in Philadelphia is democracy, pure and simple.
Hopkins. I am the postal employee who came out and whistle blew on the Erie, PA Postal Service, postal office. I am right at this very moment looking at an article written by Washington Post. It says that I fabricated the allegations of ballot tampering. I'm here to say that I did not recant my statements. That did not happen. That's not what happened. And you will find out tomorrow. And I would like that the Washington Post recant their wonderful little article that they decided to throw out there, out of random.
Well, Cindy, let's go back to Hammer and Scorecard. Are those the names that you just used for those programs? What's being done about it, and how broadly were they used by vote counters in various states?
I think they were very broadly used, but not by the vote counters. They were used by the forces in the Democratic operatives that had access to these programs through the government access points that they have, and used it illegally to change votes in this country. It's got to be investigated probably by the president's most trusted military intelligence officials who can get into the system and see what was done. But we do have some evidence that that is exactly what happened. And they've used it against other entities in other countries. It's just been turned recently against our own citizens here to change election results. It's absolutely appalling that that can be done. And whether it's called computer glitches or something else, somebody has actually gone into the system and changed voting results.
That's called intervention in our elections, irrespective of I guess if they were Russia or China, we'd refer to them as meddling. But it's intervention, and it's also crooked as hell, rigging this election.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Mr. Would you answer that question once again?
They would never see it.
So how would such a program, a secret program that fixes the election, how could it be detected?
You would have to view it either in the source code, or you'd have to have a receipt and then count the hard paper against the actual vote total. Other than that, you won't see it.
You know, I mean, it's interesting. We're talking about corruption here. What do you make of what we're seeing in Philadelphia?
If the question is, are the Democrats stealing votes in Philadelphia, my answer is the Pope Catholic? It's a time-honored tradition in big Democrat-controlled cities like Chicago, my hometown, Philadelphia, to do precisely what they're doing now. I've never seen it on such a magnitude, because this, I think, is an indication of just how widespread it is, how deep it is, and I don't think it's just confined to Philadelphia. My instincts, again, coming out of Chicago Democratic politics, my instincts tell me it's going on in Atlanta, it's going on in Detroit, it's going on in Milwaukee, it's going on in Las Vegas. It's like what Justice Powell said about pornography. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it. And coming out of the Democratic Chicago political establishment, I know how they operate. They control polling places, they stop votes when their candidate's behind, and then in the wee hours of the morning, in the dark of night, the stealing starts. And we've seen that in big numbers, unprecedented numbers in this election in Michigan and in Philadelphia. It's outrageous. And the fact that they're doing it with the impunity they're doing it with is because the media is simply looking the other way, because they have they're a corrupt mainstream media that's not interested in protecting our Constitution or the rule of law.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.